This is a repair for the iPad first generation using the digitizer with the frame. Make sure that the iPad is fully working and that all that I would need is the digitizer to be replaced, meaning it's cracked and you just need to replace the glass digitizer. Start off with the bottom right corner. You have to pry it out. Be very careful not to bend the frame too much. It will have brackets. Just get a feel for them. You can wedge it and use another metal tool to help you. All you need is a small gap for them to be released. It's a good idea to start on the right side. For me it's easier and it's a bit more manageable. Just keep trying to pop the screen out. You really don't have to worry about the glass, but you do have to worry about the LCD. It is attached to the digitizer frame, and if you drive your tool in too deep, you risk damaging the LCD. Depending on how bad the iPad's damaged, it could be easier or it could be a lot harder. If the corners are bent in, it makes the job a bit more tough, but not too much. Just keep working the tool across all around the iPad. On this one of the corners was bent in, so it's a bit more stubborn. You really don't have to worry about any cables. The only cable you have to worry about is the LCD cable, but that's tucked fairly in deep, and the power button cable towards the top right. Just make sure you're aware that those cables are around the digitizer frame and not to drive in your tool in too deep. This is where the power button cable sits. You can pry it, but not just make sure you're not driving the tool in too deep. You have to be very careful. There's a sensor cable as well in the middle, on the top middle side, but you really don't have to worry too much about that. It's a pretty thick flex cable and it's tucked in pretty well. It comes in handy if you do have multiple tools to use to pry open this iPad. Just be patient with it. You don't want to end up breaking anything else and making the repair more expensive. There's an LCD cable that will prevent you from opening up the whole entire display from the body of it. Disconnect the LCD latch. You should just be able to pop it up and then disconnect the LCD cable. Also disconnect the sensor. Once it's free, you can begin. I believe right here I'm disconnecting the sensor and it's free now. The digitizer cable will be on your left hand side. You can see it's still connected to the motherboard. The digitizer is connected with two latches. Make sure that you're very careful with these. If you break one of the latches, you might have problems with the digitizer touchscreen. You might have issues with it going everywhere. But I mean, it just depends on where you break it. Just try not to break it. They're very fragile. And I believe this is a T6 or could be T5 or actually I think it's a T5 or T6 hex tool. Just try to see where the LCD frame is aligned to the digitizer frame. That would release the LCD from the digitizer. This repair we're doing a simple digitizer with the frame glass repair. Make sure that this will be a better option if you just get the digitizer by itself, meaning just the glass without the frame. To remove the digitizer from the frame is pretty hard, very time consuming. Price difference is about $10 or so, and with the time that you save by just getting the frame, uh, I think it'll be better. And also it'll be a more a better look to it since the frame does have the rubber grommets. And if you remove the digitizer from the frame, it does require high heat. It's not like taking a glass off an iPad 2 or 3 or 4. The adhesive is pretty strong, and you would have to use very high heat, meaning you probably melt the rubber grommets off of the frame. So this is why we choose to do the digitizer with frame already on it. Also comes with the home button and the frame. Right here I'm trying to release the LCD from the frame. It has a light adhesive on the LCD, attaching it to the frame, but it's not too bad. Sometimes it may require heat, just depends. It'll probably be easier if you did apply heat, but just a bit, just to make sure that just to make the release a lot smoother. Just go around trying to release the LCD from the digitizer frame. Shouldn't be too hard, but like I said again, you may need some heat, or you could do light force. Try not to yank it out since the LCD is fragile. As you can see, I'm not applying too much force to release the LCD, but you do have to be careful. You could always use the tool to come in between the LCD and digitizer, but I suggest not doing this unless you don't have a heat gun available. And if you do, just make sure you're very careful. Don't use too much force, as the pressure will crack the LCD. I'm using a really skinny blade. It's not sharp or anything, but it's a finer tip. It's not going to scratch or break anything. But it pretty much is just removes the adhesive from the LCD. Now just lay that somewhere where it won't get dusty or dirty. And also try not to put your fingerprints on it. You won't need this part of the digitizer anymore. That's the old one. Like I said, if you have a chance, buy the one with the frame. It makes it a lot easier, a lot quicker, and it's not too bad of a difference. And also, it will look a lot cleaner afterwards, since it does come with the rubber grommets and stuff. Also, for the sensor, you don't necessarily have to remove it from the LCD frame. You can just do what I did. It comes taped to the LCD, so you can just pry it off the frame of the digitizer when you do remove it. I'm just cleaning the uh, the LCD from any lint or dust that got on it. An alternative will be Scotch tape. If you do have it, it will clean the LCD pretty well. And on your new digitizer, it will come with a film, a protective film, both front and inside of the digitizer, the glass. It prevents you from anyone getting fingerprints on it. So be very careful once you take the film off of it, and try not to leave it. Try not to have too much time from the time you took the film off to the time you put the LCD in, because there is dust in the air. Also, it will the dust will come in between the digitizer and the LCD. That's why it's so important to clean the LCD, and it's so important to put it in as soon as possible. That way it prevents you from getting dust and dirt in between the two screens. Just place back the sensor, the light sensor, back into the frame, and start screwing in the, I believe, T6 or T5 screws. Not too sure what size it was. You don't necessarily have to tighten them up really, really tight, but just enough so it won't come off. You don't want the LCD pushing against the digitizer and causing bubbles. And on this one, this iPad did take a good beating. So what I like to do is lining up the digitizer just to make sure it's gonna fit in perfect. What happens when the frame is bent, you might have to bend the corners backwards. If not, then you do risk the chance of the actual screen of the glass being broken due to the pressure points of the corners. Also, if the corners are too bent inwards, you won't be able to get it in. To prevent the frame from any further damage, just put like a cloth or bubble wrap to protect the frame from the from getting clamped. As you can see, the top right corner, you can see that it's pretty bent in. And just be careful not to over bend it backwards. Also, be very careful with the battery. You do not want to poke it or accidentally leave a screw in there. Trust me, you do not want to do this. Can cause a spark or the iPad to start smoking. You have to be very careful since the battery is pretty big. Just be careful that there's no glass or any loose screws inside of the iPad. Be careful with the power button. You do not want to mess with the power button or the surrounding metal around it. If you bend it too much to the point where the power button gets stuck, you might have to take out the power button and then reshape the metal, and it's a lot more work. So it's better just to be careful, not to bend that corner if it's not necessary. In this case, it was pretty bent. And observe the digitizer frame. Make sure that there's no metal, screws, or anything. Like I said again, the LCD is very fragile, so you do end up leaving a screw or glass in between the two. You either end up breaking the LCD or the battery. And right here, I'm just testing out to make sure that it will fit. That corner seems to be good. And I like using something to prop up the the frame, the display, kind of helps me put it in place. If you're having trouble getting in the flex cable to the connectors, you could use some scotch tape, put it in, and I'd swivel it in a bit. Again, be very careful with those connectors. The repair is fairly expensive when you do have to solder on. And if you don't know how to solder, then you might have to outsource it, and they charge about like 75, $100. Right here, I'm just reconnecting the light sensor and the LCD cable. Make sure the cables are aligned and sitting flush. Align the digitizer with the frame. Make sure the left side is sitting properly. And the same with the top and bottom. Just kind of estimate to see if it's going to go in or not. If you try to force it in, you risk breaking either the LCD or digitizer. Right here, I'm just testing out, just double checking, make sure that the digitizer is working, and now the LCD is working. It's a good idea to test out before you install it. In this case, the iPad, there's no way of testing it until you put everything on there. It's looking like it's working. Everything's working. Touchscreen's good. LCD's good. Carefully start putting it back in the frame. And if you did bend the corners backwards, then it'll be a lot easier to put it back in. If you didn't, then you're gonna have a hard time to put this back in the frame. Had to bend it back a bit more. And now you can use this to wedge it. Be easier. The frame is pretty manageable at that point. And the corners, you have to be very careful. But if you do bend the corners, it's very easy just to put them back in. And at this point, the iPad's ready. Thank you for watching.